Well, if I'm as bright as all that, I should sit down right now because I agree with all the speakers that have gone on. And this very night reminds me a great deal of when Mayor Daley asked me to talk to some high school students, and right before I got up there, they announced that Michael Jordan was providing free McDonald's lunches as soon as Judge Castillo was done. And so I took about a 45-minute speech and I condensed it down to about 3 minutes. But let me just pick up right off the bat, and I'm not going to keep you that long because I know a reception starts right after, with the theme we just heard from Sylvia about superheroes, because really that's what I want to talk about. And my superhero is my father. And I'm just delighted to tell you that I spent most of Monday, Labor Day, with him. He's still very much alive, 90 years old. He is the one with the three things that I want to talk to you about: courage, vision, and the energy, the desire, or better put, the ganas. He is the one. And every minute that I get to spend with him is really just grace that God has given me. But let me tell you about his story, because I love talking to him about how he came to the United States. And he was in a small town, it's called Huajuapan, in the state of Oaxaca, which is very beautiful, and I've been to many times. And if anybody ever came to me with the proposition that I should leave Oaxaca, Mexico, at the age of 13, and I should leave my mother and go to another country with a promise of a better life and have to learn another language and no guarantees of success and no money in my pocket, I would tell you I would politely turn down that offer. And yet, that is an offer that your relatives have accepted. That is an offer that is accepted every day, as we've just heard. And that is the offer that my father accepted. My father in the 1940s was recruited. I want to emphasize that to you, to come to the United States, because our country had just lost many males in World War II, and they needed males. And so actually recruiters were sent down to little villages like the town where my dad lived. And my dad had the vision of knowing that he had to leave his household because he had just lost his father, and his mother was a widow with 6 strapping boys to raise. And the way my dad tells the story is every meal was divided up. And since he was the youngest, he did very poorly in that division. And he thought, I better take somebody away from the dinner table, and that somebody was him. And so he accepted a song and a dance about this great life in Colorado. And I asked him, I said, well, how did you get across the river? And this is the best one of them all. This is the one that I really want to share with you. Because he took a train. He took a train from Mexico to the United States, and he had work authorization to be in the United States for a period of time. And so I said, well, Dad, you're not a wetback, you're a dryback. What is this? You're killing the stereotype right from the get-go. And then, lo and behold, that great farm, the beet farm in Colorado, didn't turn out to be the great dream that it was advertised to be. And the way he describes it, it basically sounded like slave labor with slave wages, and you had to live in certain shacks, and he was out of there not that long. And then he went to California. And my eyes popped open when he told me that story. And I said, well, California, the beaches, why didn't you stay there? I'd be an LA kid. And he says, well, mijito, you know, the jobs ended. And so he took the train. You always follow the train. He was working for the railroads. And he was going to stop Marty in South Chicago, but something made him keep going. And he ended up in Chicago. And this is where vision takes place. Vision of just taking whatever jobs you can get. But boy, when that attractive Puerto Rican woman comes by, he certainly married her. And that takes a vision, because he had a vision of Latino unity that I certainly agree with Mr. Cabrera. Because if anybody ever tells you that Mexicans and Puerto Ricans don't get along, I say I'm Exhibit A to disprove that myth. And let me tell you, there are many other exhibits. We could go in this room and you're going to hear examples of the mixing of Latino blood. And that mixture will keep going and going and going. Believe me, my daughter has married a Dutch man. And my son has married a Swedish woman who has German blood. So pretty soon, I said when I was inducted as chief judge, which I'll talk very briefly about, pretty soon everybody's going to have Latino blood. It's just a matter of time. Just a matter of time. Well, my dad was ahead of the curve. But the one thing that he and my mother always gave me was a radiation of love. They could not tell me what schools to go to, counsel me to check to go to the boarding school. I did not go to the boarding school. Probably the biggest move I made in my life was to go to a Catholic school, because my parents were Catholic. And they involved me in the Catholic Church. And as a young man, not only did I serve Mass, but I went up there to do the readings, to read for the Mass. And now I look back on all of that, and that was all very helpful to me. And there were times when I would serve the 6:30 Mass, and there were no servers for the 7 o'clock Mass, and my parents would say, "Mijito, why don't you just stay and do the 7 o'clock Mass, and we will sit through the Mass with you." You know, so they wouldn't just say, "Do it," and walk out. They would show me by example what it was. And that always stuck with me, because later on, as I joined the law firm and became the first Hispanic associate there, and then later on became a federal prosecutor, and I tell you, today, I rise not only to speak on behalf of my dad, but I rise to speak on behalf of all the Latino judges in this city, which number about 30, and I will tell you it's not proportionate to 30% of our city's population, but we're working on it. But I rise also to speak on behalf of those Hispanics who have served in law enforcement, such as Rick Mesa or myself, and especially those Hispanics who have given their lives serving in law enforcement for this country. And I think about that all the time when I'm going down Ashland on my way to Nuevo Leon, and I think about poor police officer Irma Ruiz, who gave her life to save some kids at a public school on the west side of Chicago. And that was really not well publicized, because there was a shooting up in Winnetka at the same time. That was very tragic. They were both tragic events. But the fact that Irma Ruiz, a Mexicana, would give her life to save all those public school children from some deranged gunmen has always haunted me, because those kind of examples occur over and over again. And I got to see them as a federal prosecutor when Agent Kiki Camarena was kidnapped in Mexico fighting the drug war that we have fought in the United States and tortured to death. And yet he gave no information, and is one of a number of Hispanic agents who time and time again lead our country's charge against the drug war. When you see the people that have been arrested in Mexico, know that it is Mexican-American agents who are doing the arresting. Make no bones about that. They are the ones who are putting their lives on the line day in, day out. And until the poor Lieutenant Wiskowski was killed up in Fox Lake, the last officer who died in Chicago was an officer named Bartolome Cardenas, and one of a many of long line of Hispanic officers from the Chicago police force who have died in the line of duty. And this follows our tradition of giving in battle. And let me tell you a story about that. When my dad was in Colorado, one of the haunting stories he tells me is of being with a Marine captain who was Mexicano, who was not served in a bar, even though he had lost his arm and was in full uniform, a captain. He was not served because you could not serve a Mexican in that Colorado bar. And my dad was offended, but not so offended that he didn't himself volunteer to go to Korea. And thank God, because he was a non-citizen, he was not accepted. And I was born. Well, some things always work out. And I will tell you, it has worked out for me because my dad has always had courage and vision, and he's given that to me. So I had no bones about becoming a prosecutor and leaving a law firm. And when Maldiv came to me and said, you should work on behalf of your community, I was only happy to do that. And one of the great things that I look at now is what Marty talked about, is to be able to go into court and create the first Hispanic congressional district, which is very ably represented by Congressman Gutierrez, who happens to be one of the few forces who is speaking up about immigration and immigration reform and defending the right of immigrants, not only Mexican immigrants, but immigrants from all over the world who keep coming to our country, who I now have the privilege of swearing in as U.S. citizens. And I will tell you, when you see the benefit that we get out of that, why do we get the benefit? Is because our community has always had courage, vision, desire, call it ganas, but we work hard, we're there every day, we have a commitment, and I see that commitment all the time. And the vision, and let me tell you, my dad only went to the 3rd grade, but I'm going to tell you a story about him that is going to bring it home in terms of what he feels about education. One of the proudest days for me was not anything that I ever accomplished in my life, but it was the day that my wife received her doctorate in psychology. And I was very busy at that time. I had received an appointment to a commission in Washington, D.C., and my dad knew that one of the best ways he had to talk to me was to drive me to the airport on the way to Washington, D.C. I was a sitting federal judge, a vice chair of what's called the U.S. Sentencing Commission, 2 presidential appointments, and I thought I was pretty important. I was reading some briefing books. My dad is doing the driving. We're on our way to O'Hare. That is the scene. And my dad says to me his famous words, "Mijito, I've been thinking." And boy, I put that book down because I knew something was going to come. Because when he says those 2 words, you have to pay attention. And you do that because we're raised with respect. And so I said, "Yes, Papi, what have you been thinking?" And he says, "Sylvia," that's my wife, "Sylvia just got her doctorate in psychology. Maybe you should go back to school and get a doctorate in psychology." And I'll tell you, all kinds of things came into my mind. All kinds of things, including throwing myself out of the car. But because we're raised with respect and we're raised with humility, all I could stammer after having been a trial attorney for 16 years, having been a district court judge for 10 years, I was not the chief judge at that time, all I could stammer was, "But Papi, a Juris Doctorate is a doctorate degree." And he told me, as he tells me all the time when I answer his legal questions, he's always asking me questions. How could this person say that? What about immigration reform? Is it going to happen? he told me the same thing. I don't think that's right, son. That's his normal response when I answer his legal questions. But I love him dearly because he has a vision. And then I was thinking, you know, when I did become chief judge, he was not impressed because he is, after all, an immigrant. And so what impressed him when I became a district court judge was that it was a lifetime position that you got to keep for life. Tenure, you know. I said at that time, I think you were there, Marty, in 1994, an immigrant's dream, a lifetime job for life. But when I became chief judge, the question that he asked me, he said, now, mijito, now that you're chief judge, you got a raise, didn't you? And I had to say, no, I didn't. And he's like, that doesn't sound right either. And if I had his vision, you know, now that I've been chief judge for 2 years and dealing with all the problems of trying to take care of the third largest court and about 36 other judges and a workforce of about 200 that I'm going to see tomorrow morning early, I think I should have gotten that doctorate in psychology, you know? I should have stuck to his vision. But, you know, he is a great man. I'm blessed to have him. And oftentimes I think, you know, I would never be in the position that I'm in without his counsel and advice, or without me, when I was at a law firm, being able to say to him, we're both working late, Dad. Can you go get our kids tonight and go get them and take care of them? And knowing that they were going to be not only well taken care of, but they would get that kind of counseling that I've received, that is una bendición. And for that is the power of the Latino community. Our overwhelming, extended family network that goes to parents, grandparents, sister-in-laws, all the people that when you get one Latino, you get about 50 people behind them. And so I'm going to end right there. Enjoy the reception tonight. Thank you.